Okay, here's our community literacies project. First community was Bentonville, Arkansas. And one really common text here is the Walmart Spark, because Bentonville is where Walmart was founded and is the location for Walmart headquarters. Many of the students here have parents who work for Walmart corporate, and our town is pretty much sponsored by Walmart, so it's very appropriate that students would recognize this literacy. In order for children to read this text, they'll need to be able to associate the yellow spark symbol with the Walmart brand. This is similar to text found in schools because of frequent Walmart sponsorships here and the fact that brand logos are always around us. Because Walmart and all of its sub-brands are king here, this symbol is a literacy that's very important to teachers. I learned that brands are an area of literacy we're constantly bombarded by, and that children learn to recognize brand logos early on. This is a handicapped parking spot, and I selected this text because it's one that children are surrounded by from the time they're born. Although many students might not understand who the handicapped spots are intended for, when they see the blue square with a symbol of a person with a wheelchair inside of it, they'll know that their parents won't park there. In order to read this literacy, students must recognize the blue square on the road, if not the wheelchair symbol with the blue square. This symbol may actually be present in some schools in order to reserve spaces in the cafeteria or auditorium for people in wheelchairs. I learned that as a future teacher, students will rely on the experiences they've had with symbols like this in order to make meaning. Crosses are another text that is very common in the area because of the Southern Baptist religion. Although most churches have a cross outside, a landmark for the community are these giant crosses that tower over all the nearby buildings. In order to read this text, children must be able to recognize the cross shape from their experience going to church, which is really common for the area, or conversations with adults about what the symbol means. You'll even find cross-themed doctor's offices here, so children will likely have had a lot of exposure to the symbol. They might attribute it to getting a shot, though, if they aren't literate in the true meaning of what a cross is. This is important as a teacher here because many of the children will utilize crosses in their illustrations, wear cross necklaces, and make it a large part of their identity and literacy. Therefore, it will be important to understand an appropriate way to discuss the text without sharing personal beliefs. I also learned that shapes can hold even religious meanings. Lastly, this is a fire hydrant. This fire hydrant is a recognizable text for children in the United States and especially in our community because of kids' strong interest in firefighting, its presence in children's books, and perhaps conversations at school about what to do in a fire. Children might know what a fire hydrant does by referencing the images that they've seen in these settings. Others may just recognize it as an odd shape on their street that dogs like to go to the bathroom on. In order to read this text, children must recognize the shape, likely a yellow or red color, and in order for it to be literately correct, they must attribute it to a past experience. As a teacher, I learned that reading shapes can tell a child about a career or even about disasters like fires.
So my name is Maddie Duke, and I'm going to be discussing the literacies in the second community that McKenzie and I are looking at. So the second community is Sandy, Utah, which is my hometown, and it's in Salt Lake County. It's about 40 minutes north of BYU. The pictures that I found, the text that I found, I used Google Earth to find them. And I tried my best to find texts that children are constantly interacting with. So first, I'm going to just go through them. I think I have 10 or 11 of them, and then I'll go more in depth about a few of them. So the first one is Carl's Jr. You can see the text here or just the building in general with all the posters. Here's a sign on the corner of a light, and it says the community of Grace Presbyterian Church. Then a construction cone, a gas station sign, an LDS church building, a library sign, Flatiron Park, the hills, are the distinctive image in this text. A freeway entrance, so the main sign, and then the little signs over here. A school zone speed limit sign, a stop sign, a super target sign, and a Corey Bend sign. So this is just a area with lots of shops, lots of places to eat, stuff like that. So I believe that children interact with these signs every day, especially since this is my hometown. These are things I interacted with daily when I lived at home. The next sign I want to discuss the next text is Flatiron Park. This is a very distinctive park that I was constantly going to as a child, so I'm assuming that a lot of other children are there doing the same as I did. It's known for these huge hills. A child might look at these hills and make connections to sledding, running up and down the hills to strengthen their fitness, ice blocking, rolling down the hills during the summer, or just a simple, beautiful landscape. For me, these hills remind me of soccer practices at this park and sledding. I often would ask my mom, "Where is soccer practice?" She would respond, "Flatiron Park, the one with the big hills," and that's when I constantly could picture this text in my mind. Um, this type of text is also a way for children to make connections to what they might be learning in science. They might be reading about hills and trees, and when they see this, they make the connection to that literacy so that they're able to continually use that literacy again. They might also recognize the lines and connect that to a geometry lesson. Next, I'm going to talk about the LDS church building. As we know, this church meeting house, we find these on every corner. They represent the large community of LDS members, which I'm sure a lot of children in this community are a part of. Each church does not look exactly like this one, however, they are constantly recognized by the structure of the building, but also usually recognized by a sign that is on each building. I wasn't able to get a picture of that text, but that text reads, "The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, all visitors welcome." Um, so, children are able to strengthen their literacy skills by recognizing the church, but also reading the sign that's on it. And a lot of children in this community come into contact with this text. Next, I wanted to talk about this. It kind of goes along with the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints building. It's another church near my house, and through this sign, children are able to learn and recognize that there are other religions in their community. Children might be drawn to the blue background, the different colored letters, the letters that are bolded. However, if they do not have the required literacy skills, they might recognize a few words and use context to figure out what the words say, or happen to see the cross or symbol on the church behind the sign, which is not pictured. So they might see the word Sunday and be like, "Oh, that's a church," or they might know that how to read church, and they might relate that to the LDS church, but might be interested in finding out more about this religion. And then Carl's Jr. This kind of applies to America in general, but this is the closest fast food restaurant to my house. Children have to be able to explicitly read Carl's Jr. However, this fast food chain is also recognizable by the yellow star that is outlined in red with the smiley face. I believe that it's not as recognizable as like the McDonald's Golden Arches. However, I'm sure it can be understood by those who are constantly encountering this food restaurant. Fast food chains might be referenced in the classroom and might be learned about through social means. So seeing this text outside of the classroom will allow students to make a connection to something they learned in class. So after doing this, I realized that most texts in the classroom are more academic based. They might be creative, but this includes books, textbooks, short stories. They're longer, they use words more explicitly, and they allow students to develop literacy skills more clearly. Um, However, these texts that are pictured, um, they're used to make connections to the curriculum or the traditional text that they read in the classroom or the lessons they learn in the classroom. This is also another way of strengthening their literacy skills. So, what I learned and I want to apply as a future teacher is that all types of text help students to strengthen their literacy skills. The traditional text in the classroom and also these texts that we encounter every day of our lives. So, in conclusion, students are constantly learning how to read, write, speak, and listen to others through these texts and through the texts in their classroom. Okay, so me and Kenzie both went over our individual texts that we saw in the different communities. So we're just going to address these questions real quick. So we noticed that due to the coronavirus, we weren't really able to go into the communities and see a lot of the text, but from the text that we did see, we found that our communities are fairly similar, even though they're very far apart. However, there were a couple differences that we did notice. Um, for me, in Sandy, I did notice the prevalence of the LDS community in the text. So we saw this in my picture of the LDS meeting house, and then we can also see this in temples and downtown. There's a lot of church-owned buildings. So that's one thing that I don't think you would see in Arkansas just because the LDS community is so strong in Sandy and in Utah in general.
And one thing that I noticed about the community that I studied that definitely isn't prevalent in Sandy is that Walmart is a huge deal here with the corporate offices. And it's a really big business center here. And so there's so much Walmart sponsorship and just a large presence here that children would be surrounded by all the time. That is something they definitely don't experience in Sandy. Overall, we just noticed that throughout our PowerPoint, text is not just in the words, but it is especially in symbols and logos. And those are things that we're surrounded by every single day from the time that we're children. That it's really interesting to see how we form meanings that are personal to each of us around these symbols and logos.
Yeah, so in conclusion, we just wanted to say that as teachers, we want to apply this to our classrooms and to recognize that our students are interacting with symbols and all sorts of different types of text that are affecting their literacy every day. And we need to recognize that we can't just um, say, oh, you only can learn from traditional text, but that they're surrounded by all sorts of texts that are affecting their literacy.